interruption scheme, for the large business interruption scheme. But I mean, the Billies alone are losing about 12,000 jobs. British Gas, 2,000. BP, about 250. Rolls-Royce, 3,000. Even Frankie's and Benny's restaurant chain. I mean, you're talking, substantial layoffs literally nearly every week now, in the media. So whether these budget resolutions and all these support packages are actually going to work, I just, because my worry is that at the end of the day, whether you're giving your free vouchers to eat out on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, giving employers another £1,000 to when they come out of furlough to keep their workforce employed, whether any of this is actually going to work is a moot point, because at the end of the day, it's been financed by the Bank of England electronically pressing a button. It's fiduciary money, it's paper money at the end of the day, in the billions, the hundreds of billions, and at some point, all this money, the Bank of England governor, didn't he, about a couple of weeks ago, actually admitted in March that the government was effectively bankrupt. The state was bankrupt. And they had to inject 200 and odd billion and basically buy up government treasury bills. And it was the Bank of England that actually bought them up. And then they had to have another emergency, have another 100 billion, because private investors wouldn't buy government gilt treasury on balance sheets. Are literally bankrupt, going back to 2008. Most of the banks in this country and most of the banks globally and internationally are zombie banks. They've been propped up by debt and giving them huge loans, all at that level. And I said before everybody joined us that the TUC's recovery document, Better Recovery, has now been wound out in the regions. So now you've got a Northwest version. So all the TUC regions, you've got the West Midlands version, you've got an East Midlands version. So what you've got is like the national aims and objectives, and then now you've got the local regional, and you've got all the people, as I mentioned earlier before a lot of people joined us, for all the regions. We can go through West Midlands. It goes through all the different towns and districts that have been furloughed: Walsall, Solihull, Sandwell, Dudley, Coventry, Forest, Tamworth, South Staffordshire, Newcastle upon Lyme, Lichfield. It goes a whole list, and most of them are in the early, and some of them are the late 30s. So Tories are actually doing. And I mean, the classic strategy was originally, of course, after Brexit, whatever your position on Brexit was, they basically, we know what the TUC's position was. It was totally opposed to it with the Labour Party and whatever. That's why they lost the general election in December and lost all the Northern Heartlines and Midland seats, not necessarily because working class people were voting Tory. It was because the vast majority of working people just simply abstained. The idea that, hundreds of thousands of working, there was 30%, 35% abstention rates in a lot of Labour seats that allowed the Tories to get in. What did the TUC then say? Oh, please, let's have a workers' Brexit. So they're appealing to the government, the Tory government, for a workers' Brexit. And now, of course, they're appealing to the Tory government again and saying, oh, well, please, you've got to do this, that, and the other. And to be quite honest, a Starmer, Blairite, right-wing Starmer government wouldn't implement half the policies the TUC are asking for the Tories to implement. And I just think it's just a wrong, it's class collaborationism on a national and regional scale that's been literally unheard of outside wartime, basically. I mean, the first budget that the Tory Chancellor came out, I mean, the TUC were basically praising it to the hilt and basically saying, "Oh," and I think we're going to have to, convince our members and basically try to organise now. If we can get out of this COVID-19 period, which again may not be any time soon without a proper vaccination, that an austerity too is going to kick in. And that's one of the reasons that we invited a speaker for the National Pensioners Convention to come and speak at our next Zoom meeting, ordinary general meeting for the Greater Manchester TUC. Because we're really concerned that, pensioners in particular are going to be really, really hit by any kind of austerity too, and the ending of the triple lock on pensions and things like that. And the fact that the Bank of England are basically printing all this money. Treasury bills usually go to, pension funds, and they're basically worthless. So how are these pension funds going to keep paying out pensions, going forward when they're basically getting no income off government stocks anymore? And it's going to be a real serious issue, I think. So I don't know. That's my pitch anyway, for what it's worth.
I think if things are going to get worse, we're stopping it altogether, or cutting it back to 60% and expecting the employer to make up the rest. There are numerous employers who have got no income coming in at the moment whatsoever because they're not producing anything. They are not going to keep on paying 20% of money they have not got. They're just going to make those workers they've got redundant, just increasing the pool. Our biggest store in Birmingham, which is John Lewis, just announced today they will not be opening in the future. And it is the biggest store in Birmingham. And it's going to have a massive knock-on effect because it's right in the centre of Brom, and it's the biggest renter of the Birmingham's New Street Station complex. So that's going to cause problems there, and we'll go on again. Another shock for pensioners is the free TV licence for over 75s also ends on the 1st of August. And despite all this money that the government's chucking at everybody, they are going to get it back by putting taxes up next April. Make no doubt about it. They will make us pay for it next April.
Okay. Stefan, do you want to reply to that? Can you unmute yourself, Stefan?
We did. Yes, yeah. I obviously, it's true. I just can't see how it's all going to work out. I mean, I think one of the disturbing things is that now I might have misheard it. For example, the government's put in this, the TUC has been doing it, and like a green agenda, a green package, recovery, sustainability, and on our part for the Greater Manchester, I think we've organised two. The two largest demonstrations in the country, in support of climate change and this, that, and the other, in Manchester over the recent years, and I think Starmer, I might have got it wrong, but I'm sure I heard that Starmer was going to reduce the zero carbon target for 2030 or something. So we can see Labour pulling back on a number of these issues. Good, sometimes you just off the budget, or the budget, they have to be seen to be ploughing back and taking off the money from whatever. And we all know that Labour got into a bit of councils are in dire problems. the pandemic has caused in the local actually developed, and you know, at least now, whether it's pensionisations, you know, food and whatever. The pandemic, we've been giving out food parcels and things like that because
he's clapping the lists and so on. Yeah, well, we clap them in prison. But I mean, this is the point in terms of who's going to pay for that. They're paying, actually giving people away from one way or the other from COVID to get themselves on their feet. If they've got an income, a reasonable income, not the lowest possible wage, something equivalent to it as it is at the moment. The prisons are releasing people out of prisons onto the street, nowhere to go. It's a new we have done over Brexit as well. That they've been going completely.
Did all the, you know, for what projects or whatever, and the area. And now you've got to do now. Wimbledon, Manchester, of all national TUC, abided by TUC policy or not, and whatever I put down as this is what we're organising, it could be something completely bloody different. And we were helping the unemployed, we were helping BMA communities, we were putting on things all over the things that weren't necessarily, you know, possibly TUC policy at the time. But then they tightened everything up. And unless it's part of the particular areas, that is why we've got to be careful in what we're doing and everything and having to put down things. But I mean, like I say, you know, the TUC itself nationally has made it, you know, much difficult for the local TUCs and county associations to actually access those funding because it's got to comply with much more strict regulation. Key themes are, and over 2 themes. And if your local project didn't necessarily quite fit into it, you didn't get the money. A dozen other different sub for your text or whatever, and region as well. You know, we all know the problems we had trying to get a representative to the, you know, the English TUC Congress, didn't we? And to be able to put one motion forward. You know, and, you know, when Scotland and Wales have always had, local TUC's representatives rather than an honorary member turning up that can't vote and can't actually participate in the debates. So we've still got all that hasn't really been resolved going forward, even though we've got a representative and we've got one motion, you know. You know, so again, you know, what the TUC say and on the one hand and what they actually deliver on the other in the terms of support and you know, really understanding the role of trades councils on the ground, you know, is a different matter. And again, we've got to keep pursuing all these things as well, because we need democratic accountability. And the TUC have produced all these documents. They've produced all these regional variation of these documents now. But I mean, have any of you been consulted? Has the county associations been consulted? Has any consultation gone out about the whole process of what should be in the documents, what should be done, what local initiatives or what local, programs should be developed? We've had nothing. We just simply had all this stuff being stuck on the TUC website and said, there you go, that's it, it's been done. There's been nothing. There's been no consultation, no democratic process, no debate, no open discussion of anything. And I think, we've got to be really careful that we don't lose our rights, for a democratic voice, to be heard in the trade union movement.
Stefan, we've got 2 more questions. Next one is Andrew, then Abu. Andrew first, please. Andrew, if you can unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can everybody hear me? I don't know really where to begin. There's several strands of what I've been listening to tonight. The first point is that I wouldn't abandon the Labour Party, regardless of who is the leader. The left has grown still a lot of members, and frankly, if you left the Labour Party, would only be repeating the mistakes of the past under the Kinnock era. And one generation really paid a price for that, and I wouldn't want to see the next generation pay the same price. In terms of macroeconomics, well, I'm an economics teacher. Treasury bills, spending, quantitative easing, etc. It's all a question of what you're prepared to actually spend the money on. And I think what the left actually really needs to do is to do several things. In terms of basic economics, what we do need to do is we need to improve capital investment, productivity, etc., and target that. At the same time, if the taxpayer and future generations are actually going to pay for this, you've got to do it in such a way as you actually protect it. And as a socialist, I'm a firm believer of an old idea called industrial democracy. And I think that should actually be a bedrock. Now, the wider question is, in terms of what we've actually listened to, is how did the left actually get anywhere in a position to recapture the gains that we did when Mr. Corbyn actually became leader? And broadly speaking, I think what we need to do is actually target, say, 5 or 6 areas which will actually win public support, because that actually affects people's lives. One of which I would personally advocate quite strongly is adult social care, state of the NHS, the creeping privatisation, the bureaucratisation of the NHS, also in terms of unemployment, the gig economy, the uncertainty. A lot of the question about globalisation, I think what we've got on the left that actually takes that uncertainty away from people's lives and gives them confidence. And the way to do that is to empower people in their own communities. Now, Stefan quite rightly on the last point I want to make, because I know other people want to speak. Stefan actually made a point about the role of the TUC and etc. Unfortunately, because it's gone in such a decline in my local area, I'm not by any means as knowledgeable about this as he is. But I think obviously it certainly has a role to play. And I think that the way the left can protect itself against the attacks on the right is quite simple. When does the left become successful? It becomes successful when it promotes democracy. And that, I think, should be the focus of the left, both in trade unions, labour branches, etc., and the NEC. Because quite frankly, there's a lot of sinister people in groups like Labour First, who are waiting in the wings to actually exploit this. We do not walk away. We can fight them, we can defeat them. We've never been stronger in some ways, but we need a programme that will not alienate ordinary people, that will address people's lives. And I think the Brexit decision, while practically correct, did not resonate with people's voice because they'd already voted to leave. And I think that's why we were much stronger in 2017, because we acknowledged that and we had a programme that moved forward. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom, but I think we need to look at it very carefully. Thank you very much indeed for giving me the chance to speak.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to say that from Andrew, I agree with every word you've said there. I mean, and there's no way. I mean, I've been a Labour Party member for it's getting on to about 47 years now, and I don't know how many times they've tried to expel me. And 30 odd years ago, when I was in Wales, I set up a local campaign group and whatever, and they tried to expel me from the Labour Party, you know, when Blair got first elected, and I wrote a letter to the local prayer and basically said, well, we all know what's going to happen now. We all know what's going to happen with Trident, and we all, you know, and nuclear, and we all know what's going to happen, and the wars that are going to occur under Blair, and this, that, and the other. And I just listed the whole, and I said, and the fight starts now. You know, we've got a Labour government, but the real fight starts when a Labour government is in office, and you know, and people are going to stay in the Labour Party and fight it. And of course, because of the Iraq War and everything else, many thousands of people joined, and then you had Momentum and this, that, and the other. And I helped set up a local Momentum group in Haywood, Rochdale and Haywood, that's still going on, a Corbyn support group for those who weren't actually members of the Labour Party, who supported Corbyn. We've definitely got to stay in the Labour Party. I mean, I've had my local journal for about 25 years called The Link, open forum of Labour Party members and trade unions to reclaim the party. We claim it from Blair, from Gordon Brown and whatever at the time. And I mean, I think one of the first things I wrote just after, I said, Starmer's Pyrrhic victory, the architect of bloc Brexit strategy, led directly to the 2019 general election disaster and the collapse of Labour in the heartlands. And the link says, and this was right then, no to a government of national unity to save the Tories. You know, so I've been personally saying this for a long time. Obviously, I've got my own, positions. There's many trade unions who are members of the Labour Party. The president, Stephen Hall, who's been president of the county about as long as I have for the last nearly 14, 15 years. He recently rejoined the Labour Party because of Corbyn and whatever. And he's still a member. But yeah, we got to stay in and fight the fight. And it was, the trouble is, I think, with whatever the problems with momentum and the leadership there and everything. I mean, a lot of the people that did return, after 20 odd years, and a lot of the young members, they really didn't have a clue, to be honest. They really didn't have a clue. And I was able, unfortunately not in Rochdale, but in Haywood and Middleton, for Momentum to actually have a clean sweep of the CLP and win literally every major position and and control the executive. But I had to give them a lot of support to do that. People were wanting to compromise, to split the slate, to allow all these right-wingers and right-wing councillors to basically dominate the CLP because they turned up to a couple of Momentum meetings, etc., etc., and they were mouthing some leftist slogans, basically to enamour themselves to get re-elected again and to get chosen as candidates, etc. And you really had to sort of like put it down and say, look, I might not look it, but I'm a bit old in the tooth here. And, you need to do this and do that and not do this and do that. And they did actually, I went to a lot of people's houses and we had meetings in people's houses and whatever, and we knocked out a strategy and they won the day. But if we'd gone along with some of these people, these older people that had left the party 20 years ago, and some of the younger ones, it was, let's make a compromise. And I said, no, at least if you have a program and a platform and an agenda, at least you then know where you stand. Whether you win or lose, you lose on it. Once you start watering it down and making compromises, you need to test your strength. You need to know where you stand locally and whether the rest of the membership in the local party are going to support you. And I held my ground. They developed that strategy and they won through. Unfortunately, in Rochdale, that wasn't the case. So we had massive influxes of local members in CLPs like Rochdale that went from like 300 members to literally nearly 1,000 members now, but nobody turns up to meetings. You've got all these trade unionists that have joined, you've got all these things, but nobody turns up to the meetings. Nobody turns up to their ward meetings.
Stefan, have you ever asked them why?
Well, yeah, because they turn up, quite a lot of them do turn up to the Momentum meetings, but of course, in Rochdale, we've got a really bad situation. We've got a very right-wing, corrupt Labour council, to be quite honest. And I make no bones about it. And in the local elections, I usually say, vote Labour against Alan Brett. Vote Labour against the leadership. Recruit, come into the party, throw these people out, because basically these people have control over the selection process. And the local government committee, basically, or whatever they call it now, campaign forum or whatever, and they control and they dominate the whole processes of candidate selection, and they refuse to allow any left-wing candidates or whatever to even stand as candidates. Never mind.
You know what your next battle is, then, don't you?
So again, you've got a whole kind of like the whole regime, a corrupt regime going on for many, many years. I I know it's only a personal thing. I don't know whether I should mention it. I mean, you had the leader, Alan Brett came in after the Richard Farnell, who was the leader. And remember, he was in the child sex abuse tribunal in London, giving evidence that said when he was leader for the first time, when he was quite a young man, in the 1980s, and the allegation was that he covered up all, Cyril Smith, the paedophile rings that were happening in Rochdale, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he did his testimony and evidence, and nobody believed him. And I got in contact with the survivors in Rochdale, and we had a big campaign, and I had a campaign to oust him. And I did oust him. And the result of that was that I was stripped of everything. I was regional secretary of the co-op party. They came to the local co-op party meeting and stripped me of everything. Regional secretaryship, local secretaryship, Greater Manchester, delegate to the, everything, as a revenge because I'd got rid of him and whatever. Because of because nobody believed him. I mean, the guy was the London Metropolitan Police had him under investigation for over 12 months for perjury because of giving lies to a fully constituted national inquiry, and nobody believed him. Nobody believed a word he actually said. And then he was trying to, there were some local councillors, some of them who had died, head of education, social services people that, that had died, and he was putting responsibility on people who had died who couldn't actually answer the allegations. Say, no, it was their fault. It wasn't my fault. I'd never heard of anything. I never heard of what was going on. Well, I tell you now, I'd left Rochdale. I came back to Rochdale after about 30 years of absence in 2000. Okay. I, as a lad, and I'm living in my mother's house now, who unfortunately died about 10 years ago, right? When I was a kid, 5, 6 years old, we used to throw stones at Cyril Smith's bloody car when he was a Labour councillor, because everybody knew he was a bloody pedo. And everybody on the street knew about it. And for a council leader to turn around and say, oh, I've no idea. I didn't get a report from social services. I don't know what's going on. And we had Rochdale Alternative Press in the 80s that they said to Cyril Smith, sue us. And called him out as a paedophile and all his activities.
Slightly getting out.
I know, but I'm just saying, all these things.
Off the topic, comrade.
The local Labour Party tried to protect him, tried to cover up for him, lied to him, and everything. So this is the problem we have in some local situations in the Labour Party. But it's never stopped me from carrying on and fighting. And I'm now a trade union delegate for my union branch to Rochdale CLP, and I'm on the executive and everything. And they haven't been able to stop me and get rid of me. Okay.
Okay, we've got one more question.
I've indicated this week.
Hold on.
Okay.
We have one more question. Abu. Okay,
yeah.
Abu.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I want you to know, what was the strategy of the unions against the last austerity, the decade of austerity, and if you think there's going to be more austerity, what could they possibly cut now after doing austerity for 10 years?
Okay.
I think let's throw it off the question, if it's a question, before Stephen answers it. Let's do it, right. And then I think John Rafter as well.
Right, okay. I wanted to ask a question and make a couple of points.
No, just quick question, Richard. Stuart, please don't use it.
What I find very, very interesting in your contribution, and obviously we need to pursue it more in the Trades Council, is the description of the TUC documents, the West Midlands TUC document, the various. Very interesting if you could give more details on that. We find that the regional secretary is completely unaccountable. I mean, he sits on committees of the West Midlands Authority, but never gives any report to the trade union movement. I thought there was a very interesting point made by Andrew about what's the nature of this crisis, and he says the fall in GDP has been more rapid than in the 1930s. I think, which is true, but I think the unemployment rate in America recently went up to about 15%. It's gone down to 11%, whereas in the 30s it reached a peak of 40%. And in Britain, 20%. So I'm not so sure we're going to have such a deep, a long-term recession. The American recession occurred really to the end of the 30s and was only ended by the war production. But just
I'm sorry to put in, but just brief. If I could just say briefly, in 29 it fell by that, but the effects wasn't felt for a number of years. I mean, it didn't even hit Germany till about 32. So to say the initial, it will take some years to feed through. I think that's something we need to actually bear in mind.
Yeah, I mean, there was from 29 to 32. But I just want to think about the Labour Party.
Do we have to?
One of the things is how you're going to pay for all this, because you're talking about an enormous debt. You know, it's now the Financial Times talks about 360 billion predicted deficit this year, compared with 154 billion in 2009. You know, more than twice the deficit. And the question of a wealth tax has come up, and Adia, the shadow Chancellor Anneliese Dodd has sort of talked about it, but actually in the reply to the Chancellor's thing, she ruled it out. You know, so they're all over the place. You know, under Corbyn they did commit themselves to increase.
Can you please not?
60.
There are other people waiting to answer questions.
All right, okay. And
okay, thank you.
The Labour Party's got incoherent on this question.
I think John Rafter, you wanted to say something. John?
Only if you have time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, really echoing what Stuart has just said. I think you can say that with the answers to the questions that are posed within the economy of the UK at the moment, that the Labour Party is positioning itself almost to the right of the Conservative Party. This is not a Conservative Party that is a Thatcherite neoliberal party as at the moment. This is a political party that is desperately trying to save capitalism, and the Labour Party, because of their, I suppose some would argue, their devotion to capitalism, and I say this as a member, are offering nothing in return. When it came to the coronavirus and the lockdown, that's where countries like China and some of the other countries, New Zealand, Venezuela, where there was a proper lockdown, there was no answer from the Labour Party. It was pretty much echoing what the government had said at the time. When it came to furlough, there was no argument from the leaders to say that there was no fault of the workers, why they should take a 20% reduction in their wages. And when I work in the education sector, and there was no defence of my union, the National Education Unions, to say that we shouldn't go back until it's safe. I was going to say something about the European Union. I will very briefly. For the people who have said, and I think your speaker is great talk apart from this, may have mentioned, or somebody else, and I'm sorry if I've put that to the wrong person, and said that the European Union is somehow a force for working class, for a force for the working class, and a push towards socialism is false. Everything within the European Union is a push towards neoliberalism. I'm sorry, I've put about 20 minutes into 2 minutes. Naeem, thank you for that, cheers.
I mean, yeah, on that last point, I agree with you. I mean, I've campaigned all my life against the European Union. In the original referenda, I was just because you can show my age now. I just missed the being 18 of the voting age, and I was going around with my own leaflets in the election, and I got knocking the door, and a sergeant beat it on my door saying, "We're going to arrest you because you vote. You know, you're handing out these leaflets at ballot stations or whatever." So I've always opposed the EU, and of course the Labour Party's position for many years, and the Co-op Party and the TUC, you know, were for many years until Blair came in, opposed to the EU. The issue that somebody else raised about democracy, I really think that is why I mentioned earlier on about, you know, the next Zoom meeting we're having about Peterloo, you know, because, you know, the question of democracy and accountability, both in the wider society, industrial democracy, democracy within the Labour Party, within the trade unions, within the TUC, are such a vital, devolution structures, local authorities, and whatever, to get working class voices heard in the decision-making processes. Is vitally important. And like I say, many years I was saying, "Oh, I'm not quite sure for PR and whatever." I think, we need, something else in its place to be able to, for working people to get a genuine voice to be heard in all the decision-making structures, whether it's local, regional, national, labour, trade union, wider civic society, and whatever, and also parliamentary. And I think, and that's one of the key things that the Greater Manchester TUC had forwarded. That is why we were so adamant when we had our campaign, and we had people from Birmingham coming up when we had that conference on Devo and everything else a number of years ago, and we were pushing the TUC to, regionally and whatever to do it, and the TUC wouldn't give us any money. They wouldn't give us a grant for it or anything. So the question of democracy and a voice for ordinary working people, and for people, for ethnic minorities and everybody else is so vital to actually do that. I mean, that's one of the key things with environments and climate change and green jobs agenda that, like I say, I think some of the, needs to be pushed. And again, when it comes to democracy within the TUC, as was put before, I mean, our secretary at the moment is a guy who, he looks like he's about a 20-year-old and just come out of shorts, right, called James McKenna, because he's been now put into the job of Northwest TUC Regional Secretary because the previous incumbents, and I can't even remember her blooming name now, she's been basically furloughed off for the mayor of Liverpool, who's a mate. So she's on an extended secondment to the mayor of Liverpool, directly elected mayor of Liverpool's office and whatever. And we thought that the previous incumbent of the Northwest TUC was a bit of a whatever, but in fact, Lynn Collins was the name. Whatever, she's she's actually gone on long-term secondment, and the previous person who held the job for about 30 years, Alan Manning. Well, but he used to sign all my grant applications. He never used to bother. We put, oh, fine, never, don't worry about it. He used to give all your money, and we thought he was bad. We thought he was bad. And some of us have been saying, oh, bring back Alan. I mean, I remember just before, I remember, and he is a nice lad, and he used to be his Labour Party member, and in his day he used to be a member of a militant tendency in his younger day, believe it or not. But I do remember coming back from a demonstration in London, and one of my somebody from Manchester TUC said to him, well, after 30 years, he says, I've been TUC Northwest Regional Secretary. He says, what would you say is your most outstanding achievement? And you'll never believe what he said. He turned round to this person and said, to make sure nothing happens. And that sums it up very nicely. Yeah? He said, and what's your extent to make sure nothing happened? You know? And we thought he was bad until Lynn Collins come in, and now she beggared off. She used to turn up to general council meetings. She'd turn up to whatever and say, oh, I've got to leave early. We put in an official complaint to the JCC and saying, this woman now is whatever. She's now saying that Saturdays is going to be a working day and not work Fridays. She turns up to meetings, weekend meetings, as a full representative, and then she's leaving. And we all know why. Because Liverpool's at home, aren't they? Playing bloody football. And basically, all the meetings of the Northwest TUC are in Liverpool. 3/4 of the meetings in the Northwest, and obviously it's in north south. It's extreme west of the Northwest region. They hold one meeting in Manchester in a year.
I think
and everything is held in Liverpool. And it's just not acceptable. I quite agree. These structures and these people have got to be accountable.
Yeah. Okay.
And certainly not at the moment.
Stefan, sadly, the time's running out on us now. So
can I make a couple of announcements?
Announcements, please. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, initially, I would say that we need to respond to the new normal. Normal could be quite a disaster for the working people. And we need to come up with our alternative normal. And I think we as trade union movement should be working towards it and not relying on our leadership to give us the lead. I think we have to give the leads from bottoms down, up. But having said that, I think what I want to announce is that we've got another meeting coming next Thursday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And there we'll be discussing the issues that have come out of the Black Lives Matter. And we will be looking at racism both in the United States and in this country, and particularly in our institutions like education, the police, the social services, and everything else. So please join us then. There will be details on our website from tomorrow morning, and hopefully see you all then. And we normally hold our meetings quite regularly. So our website is www.btuc.org, and details will be posted there. We've got a Facebook page as well, which is the Birmingham Trades Council Facebook page. You can view that as well and put comments there, as well as have some discussion on what's going on. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would like to, to go that, because our Black Lives Matter meeting in the county in Greater Manchester is on Saturday the 25th of July, 11 o'clock in the morning, because we're having a special Zoom meeting. So I definitely would like to obviously hear what you've got to say, and other comments from trade unionists to inform our meeting going forward as well. I'd really appreciate that, because I did ask a number of local organisations, anti-racist organisations across Greater Manchester, People's Assembly, and Barrack, both locally and nationally, if they wanted to participate as well in our Zoom meeting, because it's no good basically white people talking about black lives. I mean, it's just crazy, so I've tried to reach out to a lot of local organizations, BME organizations as well, so hopefully they can actually contribute that both regionally and nationally as well. So thank you for that. I'll definitely try.
Well, again, if we can thank Stefan for his superlative and tremendous input in tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
A small round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate
Can I make an announcement?
Okay, just one quick one, please, Stuart.
Right.
Time's running out.
As people might know, the Birmingham Trades Council is affiliated to the Stop the War Coalition, which I've got the banner at the back. We've got a meeting next Tuesday at 7:30 as a Zoom meeting. We've got Salma Yaqub talking about the Black Lives Movement, and we've also got a report and discussion on the recent demonstration and activity on Yemen. And the code is on the chat, but if anybody wants to ring me on 0777 156 7496 to get the numbers, they can. And the Black Lives Matter have got a major event on the 9th of August in Victoria Square from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock, organised by the main figures in it, Desmond Jadu and Charlie Williams, and hopefully we will, as we have previously, have representatives there expressing solidarity with the trade union movement to this important campaign.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Okay. Unfortunately, our time's now up, and I now need to wish all a big thank you for attending tonight's meeting, and we'll see you all fairly soon.
Okay, thank